Bob Longfellow here, interrupting tonight's broadcast of Child Punishment Task Force to bring you a shocking Channel 4 Action News breaking story. 3 years after Murphy Durson was put to death for the crime of being the blood grinder, it appears that another life has been taken by the blood grinder. 29-year-old stripper Chesty McGraw was found naked on a park bench in the edge of Centennial Park with her arms and legs removed. Onlookers and peeping toms were horrified and aroused, respectively, upon finding such a poorly maintained stripper. After extensive examination of the woman's body, the wounds were found to bear an uncanny resemblance to the victims of the blood grinder. Barry Chippendale has more.
Hello, Bob.
Hello, Barry! With Murphy Durson dead, do the police have any leads on who is doing this?
Well, they don't have much just yet, but the authorities say he's within 100 feet of here.
Great to hear. Thanks, Barry. With this latest grisly murder, people of this town are wondering one thing. Is the blood grinder back? If so, does that mean the DNA evidence that absolved Murphy Durson was actually correct? Or has the blood grinder found a cure for death? Joining us now is a medium whose name I can't pronounce.
Thank you, Bob.
Now, let's get right to the important question. Can the dead come back to life?
While it is not technically possible to bring life back to a deceased body, it is entirely possible for a spirit to find a new host after the body they previously inhabited has been expired.
So what you're saying is the spirit of Murphy Durson could be inhabiting somebody else, in turn making them the blood grinder?
Precisely. It is even plausible to believe that Durson himself was inhabited by the spirit of the so-called blood grinder, which made him the calculating madman he clearly was proven to be.
Interesting. Thank you for joining us. Well, all of what you just heard was nonsense. Clearly, Murphy Durson was wrongly put to death 3 years ago, just as I always suspected. Whoever the real killer is, I won't apologize for saying this. I want them dead as soon as possible. Till then, I'm Bob Longfellow, bringing my action to you.
Hey everybody, welcome to Blodcast Week 6. I'm Nick Schwartz.
5+1. I'm Matt Bronsdorf.
This is
I fucked it up already.
Nick Schwartz.
And I'm Matt Bronsdorf.
And this is Dave Conti.
I'm Dave Conti.
Who is on vacation in Maine right now, still working on the blood grinder. Very hard, but not able to be with us.
Yes, I am indeed on vacation here this week, so I'm unable to be there in the flesh.
Last week we were talking about the things that we're doing outside of the Blodcast campaign to help drum up interest. One of those things was to do some interviews with some websites and some newspapers. This past weekend, which was Memorial Day weekend, I met up with Nancy Hudson from the New Milford News-Times to talk about the project, what we're doing, and actually to speak about Bank Street in New Milford, which is where we hope to shoot the eventual short film that we're raising money for right now. Back in 2008, when the first film was released, we premiered at the Bank Street Theater in New Milford, had an amazing reception, and it feels only right to go back to a place that embraced us and supported us in the beginning. June 9th, Thursday at 9:30 p.m. at the Triple Crown, which is a bar on 7th Ave between 28th and 29th Street. We're going to have a special show called A Night of Grinding, and it's going to be an hour-long improvised show all about the blood grinder. So if you're here on that night, come check out the show. We'll send you all the details as one of the updates on Kickstarter campaign. And also, after the show has aired, we're going to have it fully videotaped and everything. We'll cut it together and put it online so those of you who don't live in New York get to see it.
So this week we watched Evil Dead 2, which is arguably the greatest film of all time.
All right, but let's just say that I said to you, I haven't seen Evil Dead 2 yet. What would you think?
I'd think that you're a cinematic idiot, and I'd feel sorry for you.
So Ronnie America and Evil Dead's Ash share a few things in common, notably the fact that they're both reluctant heroes thrust into a bad situation. They didn't choose the path of the badass, it chose them. Unlike Ronnie, though, Ash wasn't born a badass. I feel like Ronnie was always born to be a badass. You know, he came out of the womb, literally kicking. Ash goes from being a character named Ashley Williams to simply Ash over the course of the trilogy. And in Army of Darkness, obviously, he is just the most badass motherfucker around. In Evil Dead 2, he starts as Ashley Williams, but then he gradually becomes Ash. Ash gets terrorized by the Necronomicon and all the spirits and all the evil shit going around, and he doesn't choose the badass path he goes down. And similar with Ronnie, he doesn't want to be a badass. He doesn't choose to be a badass. It just happens upon him when the Blood Grinder kills his wife.
If you haven't seen the Evil Dead movies, they start more on the horror end of the spectrum, and they veer way towards slapstick comedy as the trilogy goes on. Movies like Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, the violence is deliberately excessive to the point of being hilarious. And that's part of the charm of the movie, number one, and number two, it's part of the comedy of the movie. Sam Raimi was and still is greatly inspired by the Three Stooges. You can totally see it in Evil Dead 2. Just lots of great physical acting and physical comedy on Bruce Campbell's part. And again, a lot of the comedy comes from the violence and the excesses of the violence. And we're going to do that in the Blood Grinder. We haven't shied away from talking about how violent our movie is going to be. That's part of the appeal, I think, but the appeal is not in the violence, it's in the violence as comedy. Part of the reason I think Evil Dead 2 is really effective is the fact that it's entirely done with practical effects. There's no computer-generated imagery. The effects are just so much more tangible. You can tell that they're there and they exist, and we're going to do that too. That's our goal with this, is to have practical effects, practical action sequences, practical makeup effects, violence, everything is going to be done in camera.
Evil Dead 1 then to Evil Dead 2 is very similar to what we're trying to do with our original Blood Grinder versus the new feature that we're doing. When the first Evil Dead came out, it wasn't really much of a success theatrically. And it took a couple years of like a cult following to build up. What they were able to do was, based on the strength of the first movie, they were able to get about a $2 million budget, I believe, for the Evil Dead 2, which, if you've watched both of them, they're kind of the same movie. It's just, Evil Dead 2 is basically just a big budget remake of Evil Dead 1, which is exactly what we're doing. We made our first film, The Blood Grinder, and not a whole lot of people saw it. So that's why we want to make this new film with a bigger and better budget to give audiences the movie that we had hoped we could have made in the first place. If you've seen a lot of action movies, if there's ever a scene that involves a gang and somebody getting cornered and outnumbered, it typically happens in an alleyway, because it's a place where you're cornered, you have nowhere to go, and you're basically helpless. As we've said, we want to introduce Ronnie as a character and provide a little bit of backstory. So the short film is when Ronnie and Miss America first meet. Miss America gets cornered by a gang of thugs, Ronnie shows up, he's outnumbered, he's in this alleyway, but he kicks some serious ass and he saves the day, so to speak, but I'm not going to give away too much for you. But that's why we're shooting in this alleyway, so you get to get a sense of what we're ultimately going to be doing. Since we're talking about Ronnie being outnumbered, we're going to show you now another concept painting by Evan Ledestri, which is a scene that takes place in a bar called Club Alcohol in the feature. In the ultimate feature.
This is Ronnie tearing the place apart, trying to get information. He goes to the bartender looking for information, and when he doesn't get any compliance, he's threatened, and when provoked, Ronnie America comes out swinging. Basically, we're trying to do the ultimate bar fight with this scene.
So that pretty much sums it up for this week.
That wraps it up. Tune in again next week, of course, and tell your friends and family, and
enemies.
In the meantime, here is your moment of awesome.
Thanks.